macrocalipers were included for the OSF, whereas 225 microcalipers were included for nutrient intake assessments by excluding 6 children who did not start complementary feeding practices during the survey. This graph also shows that about the review and meta-analysis, the method that we have used. As the initial search, we have found that 56 articles, by excluding all the other articles which did not fulfill our inclusion criteria at the different stages, we left with 7 studies which we included in systematic review and meta-analysis. Among these 7 studies, only the 5 studies were conducted on AR, which is acute respiratory infection and maternal depression. And among those 7 studies, all studies were conducted on the diarrhea and maternal depression. Only 1 study was conducted on fever and maternal depression. So the social demographic data was collected using pretest semi-structured questionnaire. Length was measured by length measuring board, and weight was measured by electronic scale, and mean length for each z-score, weight for each z-score, and weight for length z-scores were calculated. Standing, underweight, and wasting were defined as z-scores for length for each z-score, weight for each z-score, and weight for length z-score less than 2 standard deviations relative to the WHO child growth standard. And weight index was constructed from variables adopted from EDHS using PCA, which is a principal components analysis, and categorized as low, medium, and upper based on their scores. Household food security access scales was used, and households were categorized as food secure versus food insecure, or food secure, mild, moderate, and severe based on different objectives of each studies. Maternal workload was calculated from 10 largest activities during the previous 1 week of the survey using the similar with the Wells Index analysis by using PCA, which is a principal component analysis, and also classified as low, medium, heavy based on their scores. Maternal depression, maternal postpartum depression symptoms evaluated using Edinburgh postnatal depression scale with cutoff point of EPDS greater than or equal to 13. EPDS consists of 10 questions that focuses on non-somatic symptoms of the depression occurring in the past 1 week period is the survey. Each item is answered from a choice of 4 options. Mothers rated the extent to which each item matched their feelings during the previous 1 week of the survey. The possible scores ranges from 0 to the 13, with higher scores indicating greater severities of the maternal depression. Infant and young child feeding practices were assessed using WHO OSF indicators and complementary feeding indicators, minimum meal frequency, minimum dietary diversity, and minimum acceptable diet were calculated from the 24-hour report. Food groups out of 8 food groups consumed by the children were categorized as 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 5 to 8. And child interest for the previous 1 week was collected as reported by the mother. For the data intake assessment, quantitative multiple pass 24 recall was used at each child's home with mother, and a second day intake assessment was done in randomly selected subsamples of the main studies which were the certifieds according to AWER, which is the Institute of the Medicine of the American base, and WHO recommendations. All these were proportionately represented. Portion size was estimated by direct weighing and measuring of salted replicas of actual food consumed by the child. Data analysis were performed using SPSS version 26 Pro, which was used for the data intake analysis, and review managers for the systematic review and meta-analysis. And the median, which is interquartile range, which is the first, and the third interquartile ranges, and bivariate, multivariate logistic regulations were carried out. And pooled ORs for exposures, odds ratios for exposure, and outcome variables were calculated using fixed effects models. Nutrient index were compared with estimated needs from the complementary foods according to the different recommendations. When we come to the results or the major findings that we have produced from the main study, we have produced 4 papers, and the first paper, which was about maternal depression and infant stunting, is published in the Journal of Maternal and Child Nutrition. And the second paper, which was about the determinants of postpartum depression, is submitted to Journal of Maternal and Child Health. And the third paper, ourselves and nutrient text from the complementary foods on the process to submit as a part of supplement issue for the Journal of Maternal and Child Nutrition. And also at the same time, we are negotiating with UNICEF in order to get the funds for the publication process charges, which would be a great opportunity for us. And the paper 4, which was about the maternal depression and child illness, which was systematic review and meta-analysis, is also submitted to the archives of the disease in childhood, and these are the 4 papers that we have produced. When we come to the findings of our study, I am going to present the major findings because of the limitations of the times. From the paper 1, factors predicting the stunting of infants in bivariate logistic regression, postpartum depression, and lack of maternal education were predicted infant stunting, whereas being in the upper weight category 1 was inversely associated with stunting. In multivariate logistic regression, only postpartum depression and lack of maternal education remain statistically significant with child stunting. This is a table that I've already mentioned in the forms of narration. From the paper 2, which was the predictors of the postpartum depression, is in multivariate logistic regression model household food insecurity, infant is underweight, and AR, which is acute respiratory infections of a child, were the best predictors of the maternal postpartum depression. Here we can see that the maternal depression was about 4 times and 12 times more likely in the household with moderated food insecure and severe food insecure relative to those food secure households. Similarly, the maternal depression was mothers whose child was suffering with AR was 7 times more likely to be depressed than those mothers whose child were healthy. Similar interpretation is for the underweight and not underweight children. When we come to the major findings of the IOSF, which is the third paper, and IOSF practices, around more than half of the children breastfeed within 1 hour after birth, and almost 100% of the children were continued breastfeeding, and almost all of the children, which is 98.2%, were fed cereals, grains, roots, tubers consumed prior to the previous days during the spread to the servant. And among those children, only 3.6% ate meat, poultry, or fish, and 12.9% ate eggs, and 90.1% had dairy-based foods. And among those children, only 6.9% had food groups greater than or equal to 5 food groups from 8 food groups. This is the tables which I already have mentioned in the forms of narration. I would like to mention this number or these figures, which is is a very low numbers, which is a 3%, is that those children feed according to our service, which is infant and young child feeding. When we come to the nutrient index from complementary foods, the median protein RM for the adults was considered the median bioavailability, and the nascent index met or exceeds WHO estimated needs, whereas energy and other micronutrients were below compared with estimated needs from the complementary foods, with largest shortfalls for vitamin C and A for all age groups. This table shows that except the median index of the protein, I don't know whether it is a busy report, except the protein, iron, and acids, all the energy and micronutrient index were below the WHO recommendations. We considered for the iron, the moderate or the medium bioavailable with the largest shortfalls for the vitamin C and vitamin A. When we come to the last paper, which was about the meta-analysis, maternal depression and child-dara disease, the relationship between maternal depression and child-dara diseases, the effect size estimates were included 7 studies. The full result showed that the strong and statistically significant relationship between maternal depression and child-dara diseases. And concerning the heterogeneity, we can see from the low heterogeneity, and there was the homogeneity between across the studies. When we look at the first plot of the meta-analysis about maternal depression and child AR, and the relationship between the maternal depression and child AR was included around the 5 studies, and the full result showed that the moderate but the statistically significant relationship between maternal depression and child AR. And we can notice that the substantial heterogeneity across the studies was noted. From this result, we come up with a certain conclusions. And 22.8% of women affected by postpartum depression, and also associated with postpartum depression was associated with stunting and inappropriate complementary feeding practices. And suboptimal complementary feeding practices and nutrient inadequacy index from complementary foods were widespread in the present studies. And stunting and underweight we found here classified as public health problems, with stunting very high, underweight high. This result suggests that an urgent need to re-examine the existing intervention programs implementing in the state areas and similar settings other areas at large. And also the household food insecurity, infanticide, and underweight were predictors of postpartum depression. Thus, improving household food security could be critical to reduce maternal depression problems in these settings and other areas which have similar socioeconomic, demographic, and other topographic areas. And from the meta-analysis systematic review and meta-analysis, maternal depression is associated with childhood illness in developing countries. From these results and conclusion, we come up with perspectives and policy implications. Given that the high prevalence of postpartum depression and infant undernutrition and suboptimal complementary food feeding practices, and also a significant association between the three has a policy implications. Therefore, training health extension workers and other frontline workers like the volunteer health promoters, early screening, routine monitoring, and treatment of depression is critical. And integrating maternal mental health and child stunting reduction interventions in a wider sustainable culture that focuses on data diversification is generally needed, like backyard gardening and poultry productions. And intervention is emphasizing the formation of BESA, which is a village economic and social association, and creating a platform to discuss maternal mental health problems as well as the child health problems in a group, and examine the impact of participation in such programs needed to be considered for the future studies. And the mechanisms underlying the observed relationship or associations should be also investigated to inform intervention strategies. And also, it is not clear whether there is a reciprocal relationship between maternal depression and child illness, whether we don't know that, whether the maternal depression increases or puts a child at a risk in order to develop a diarrhea or other illnesses, or a child illness puts the mother into a depression. Therefore, longitudinal studies in similar settings are required to identify the nature of those interactions between the reciprocal interactions between the maternal depression and child health. Finally, I would like to acknowledge individuals and institutions. The first one, I am deeply grateful to my supervisors, Professor Barbara J. Stoker and Dr. Alab, for their expertise, advices, encouragements, and helps throughout my study. And also, I would like to appreciate School DFS for financial support, and also my sincere appreciations also go to all mothers, data collectors, and supervisors, as well as the Kabbalah leaders or the Kabbalah chairman for their part, for taking a part at the different stages of my study. Special thanks go to the Mr. Fukadu, he is here, and for his tireless work and negotiating capability to secure funding. So not only the fund, but also bringing different scholars from the abroad, and he has been writing different emails, communicating from the beginning of PhD programs. We are lucky that we have taught by the Professor Gibson, who is a known specialist in the nutritional assessment. He has did that. You deserve special thanks. Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to show you some pictures that we have took from while we are conducting. This picture shows that when I was buying the different food items from the market for the dietary assessment, dietary intake assessment, this picture shows that when we were conducting the intensive training for data collectors, this picture shows that when I was conducting the focus group discussions or interviews for the BESA group, which is a village economic and social associations. But this picture, brought this picture because it's a part of our study. And when we was going through the data collections, our car was crashed with the other cars, which is a commonly called Dolphin, with a red one, which was coming from the opposite direction. Thanks to the God, we were not injured and we were not hurted. Thanks to God, because of His miracles, we were saved from these dangerous crashes. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
grateful to act as an external examiner in the first PhD differentiation here, which I consider it as my home. So I will subdivide my general reflections into 4 subsections. First, I'll be talking about the basic theory and features of PhD research, and based on that, I'll talk about the overall strengths and weaknesses of this specific PhD project. Then I will have general reflections, section by section, and paper by paper reflections. So these are probably, as most of you know, these are the basic features of a PhD research. PhD research should be able to have significant knowledge contribution to the discipline. And in terms of objective, it has to be focused. That means depth is more important than breadth. In terms of methodology, rigorous methodology, robust methodology has to be used. And in the process, the candidate should be able to demonstrate his critical thinking and analytical skills. Plus, at the end of the day, the aim of the PhD research project is to enable the candidate to become an independent researcher. And in many universities, including outside universities, PhD research project is expected to generate publications in electronic journals. So in light of these features, when I evaluate the thesis or the dissertation work of the candidate, Mr. Anchamo Anato, the first strength is I assume that it has contribution to literature in the field for 2 reasons. One, the relationship between maternal nutrition and child nutrition has been overlooked or has not been adequately addressed in the literature, specifically in low-income settings, food insecure settings. There is limited amount of literature. So in that aspect, I assume that it has significant contribution to the existing literature. It is also focused because most of the objectives have been complementary and they have been explored with adequate tips. And in the process of the research, while I read his biography, I'm very convinced that he has demonstrated adequate analytical skills and also other specific, discipline-specific skills. For example, dietary intake assessment, which is difficult, at the same time, a core competency in nutritional studies. So in light of my evaluation, Anchamo has demonstrated that you become an independent researcher in that field in the immediate future. Further, the fact that he published a good paper in a reputable journal in the area of nutrition is also a plus. However, some limitations need to be noted. The first one is the issue of design. For some of the objectives, cross-sectional design is the ideal design to address. For example, how is the relationship between postpartum depression and childhood? One limitation. The other one, major trace to validity, including the found bias in the study, had been inadequately addressed both at design and interpretation. Sometimes you may have some resource limitation. At design level, you may concede that confounding bias are possible, but at discussion level, they have to be acknowledged and they have to be considered, taken into account by interpreting the data. The other issue is with control variance. Anchamo is very clear about his exposure and outcome variance, but the problem is when adjustments are needed, when covariates are need to be adjusted, for example, in statistical models, the selection was in many cases not objectively defined. And the issue of inclusion and exclusion criteria, for example, if you say, when I assess dietary intake, if I exclude sick children, if I exclude children who are yet to start complementary food, if I exclude children who form of breastfeed, still the objective is to assess data intake within produce selection. And you overstimulate the application of intake. Information provided regarding the sampling procedure and sampling technique was not adequate. Probably Anchamo would respond with justified data one, but I assume the issue of representativeness and adequacy of sample size is position. But would also give me a chance to justify himself. So when I come to section by section comments, the title matter complementary feeding practices, different adequacy of complementary items, consumed by infant and children, and also seems very long. To some extent, it's also questionable whether these studies can really be generalized to the entire world of Louisiana study conducted in one state. So probably I would go for a title rather than application for child nutrition and health practice. The supervisor needs is really excellent. Most of them are extensively experienced in the nutrition landscape in Ethiopia very well. But I would say having a post-supervisor with psychiatry, mental health, or psychology background would have added value. The background section, the candidate has actually justified his projects, except that in some cases he went a little far to justify his studies. Like at some point he claimed risk factors of malnutrition are not known. Factors associated with malnutrition are not known. So that more studies needed, which is in reality. Plus, at some point, even in his present, he tried to justify his study based on the paper he has already published for the same project, which is not appropriate because the intention of this overall presentation is to justify the project. So paper coming from the same project should not be to justify that project. The literature review, the candidate has surveyed many relevant and updated literature, but I observed three major problems with the literature. One, beyond narrative literature review, a PhD candidate should be critical of the literature. For example, when you say study conducted in literature found this, you should evaluate that study critically. What are the limitations? Very direct and not direct value. For example, after going through your literature review, okay, what is the existing knowledge that in this study? It was inadequate or partially inadequate. And the third one, important methodologically involved context. Okay, study conducted in Estonia found this much prevalence of what scale will use? If we have 2, 3, 4 multiple ways, for example, to measure maternal nutrition, what are the strengths and limitations of this? So methodological review is an important approach. Literature review. So most of you, the literature review describes what is stunting, what is wasting, what is underweight, what are points that we use, consequences of stunting, which are less relevant and could have been addressed in the background section with one short paragraph at the beginning. Conceptual framework. So the assumption is, as the end of your literature review, you have a conceptual framework which synthesizes your reading. So if you have a very comprehensive conceptual framework, it will be easier to identify your covariates, including mediators, and you can easily describe mediation, how one factor affects the other. For example, in your study, you are interested how different factors, so they call it whatever affect maternal compression. Here, complex interplay among variables are said. When maternal nutrition affects child growth and childhood illness, another interrelated variables are said. So your conceptual framework should have described all these interrelations. But what you have is just study design, the positive side is the fact that we included meta-analysis in the systematic review is a good academic exercise. But much of the data came from small subfields. For example,